1 week after 9/11, an FBI special agent interviews a prisoner in a New York City jail.
I walked in and I sat down with them and I said, well, tell me how they did it.
Immediately after the terrorist attacks, authorities placed the prisoner in 24-hour lockdown. For a week, he's been in total isolation, with no access to TV, radio, or newspapers.
You know.
What he laid out was the attack as if he knew every detail of it. This is how you position yourself. I taught people how to sit in first class. I told you about utility knives. It was just kind of eerie.
The prisoner is this man.
My name is Ali Mohammed.
He was Osama bin Laden's spy in America. He worked for and betrayed 3 arms of the U.S. government: the CIA, the U.S. Army, and the FBI. An extraordinary triple cross. He paved the way for Al-Qaeda in the United States.
Islam without political domination cannot survive.
He helped bin Laden build the global terror network we know today. How did U.S. authorities fail to connect the dots? How did he pull it off? And where is he now? The story of Ali Mohammed, and one of the most twisted roads leading to 9/11, begins here in Cairo, Egypt. October 6th, 1981. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat reviews troops at a military parade. Suddenly, a group of army officers leaps from a truck. They spray the reviewing stand with gunfire. The Egyptian president, who made peace with Israel, is assassinated.
The world has lost a great statesman, and mankind has lost a champion of peace.
Egyptian authorities link Sadat's killers to a radical group that will... In the coming year, bin Laden will take over the worldwide fundraising network of Al-Qifa centers, including Shalaby's office in Brooklyn. At the center of bin Laden's plans for infiltrating the U.S. will be none other than U.S. Army Sergeant Ali Mohammed. Cliffside Park, New Jersey. Spring 1989. Mohammed visits this house, the home of a fellow Egyptian, an air conditioning repairman named El Said Nosser. Mohammed has agreed to train Nosser and a few other men in paramilitary and surveillance tactics. Some of the men fought in the Soviet-Afghan War. They all belong to the Al Farouk Mosque in Brooklyn. The training is part of Mohammed's fierce dedication to his terrorist mission in the U.S. It's a mission still guided by Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, now a trusted aide to bin Laden. These men will become one of the first Islamic terror cells in America.
Ali Mohammed not only served the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, but served Al-Qaeda from the very beginning of his association with Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri.
Mohammed's dedication is based on his radical Muslim beliefs, beliefs that he shared with his army colleagues at Fort Bragg.
You have one line, you accept the one line or not. So the word of fundamentalist means that I accept everything and this is my way.
At Nosser's house, Mohammed hides military documents which he stole from Fort Bragg. He also gives lectures here in Jersey City, New Jersey, in a room downstairs from the Al-Salam Mosque. Insiders call it the Jihad Office. Mohammed stocks the office with copies of his Fort Bragg training manuals, including instructions on how to build booby traps and bombs. As part of his terrorist curriculum, Mohammed teaches students to communicate using so-called dead mail drops. private P.O. boxes located at an inconspicuous location. This tactic allows terrorists to communicate anonymously. El Sayed Nosair and his fellow terrorists in training get mailboxes here at the Sphinx Trading Company in the very same building as the mosque. Brooklyn, New York, summer 1989. Over 4 consecutive weekends, a convoy of cars leaves the Al Farouk Mosque. A surveillance team tails them. After receiving a tip about a possible bomb threat, the FBI and New York police are investigating Mustafa Shalabi and his recruitment center. The convoy drives 75 miles east onto Long Island. It stops here at a firing range in the town of Calverton. An FBI photographer parks at a distance and snaps these pictures. El Sayed Nosair and his comrades produce an array of semi-automatic weapons, including AK-47 assault rifles. The 5 men, all trained by Ali Mohammed, spend hours firing their weapons. After a month, the bomb plot never materializes. The surveillance ends. Authorities make no arrests. The men have not broken any law, and at the time, terrorism is not the top priority for U.S. law enforcement.
That was something that happened overseas. There was no undercovers, there was no wiretaps. The ability to do that against a religious organization would have been incredibly difficult.
Fall 1989. Ali Mohammed finishes his 3-year tour at Fort Bragg. Even though his name has been on a watch list, he is sworn in as a U.S. citizen. Now 37 years old, Mohammed returns home to his wife here in Santa Clara, California, and he begins to work on an assignment that reflects the growing ambition of Osama bin Laden, building a terror cell on the West Coast. Mohammed's friend, Khalid Abu al-Dahab, has entered the U.S. from Egypt on a student visa and settled into an apartment near Mohammed's house. They have converted Dahab's apartment into a terrorist communication hub. They patch through calls between their native Egypt and terrorist cells around the world. New York City, July 1990. The Egyptian cleric widely known for issuing the decree to murder Anwar Sadat arrives here at Kennedy Airport. The so-called blind sheikh, Omar Abdel Rahman, is on a State Department list of suspected terrorists. But like Ali Mohammed, he too has somehow received a U.S. visa. The sheikh is one of the most prominent leaders in the world of radical Islam, and now an ally of Al-Qaeda. His presence in America is both an opportunity for bin Laden to spread his influence and a call to action for the terrorists trained by Ali Mohammed.
This was a major league ball player in what at the time was a minor league ballpark. His arrival into this country legitimized the people at the Farouk Mosque.
The blind sheikh gets an apartment here in Brooklyn's Bay Ridge neighborhood. It is rumored that bin Laden is covering his living expenses.
وقفوا في طريقها كان الجهاد في سبيل الله.
The blind sheikh starts preaching here at the Al Farouk Mosque. He declares holy war on the U.S. He calls for Islam to rule the world. His fiery rhetoric galvanizes the militants at Al Farouk, including 34-year-old El Sayed Nosair. Nosair is ready to put what he learned from Ali Mohammed into action. He will take aim at a well-known enemy of the Arab world. November 5th, 1990. El Sayed Nosair enters this hotel in Midtown Manhattan. He's disguised as an observant Jew. In a ballroom, Rabbi Meir Kahane, founder of the Radical Jewish Defense League, has just finished giving a speech. Kahane advocates the expulsion of Arabs from Israel. Nosair approaches the rabbi and pulls out a .357 Magnum revolver. He pumps a shot at close range into the rabbi. Kahane is dead. Nosair flees the hotel. Minutes later, after a shootout in the street, police arrest him. The next night in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, the FBI and local police seized more than a dozen boxes of evidence from Nosair's house. The boxes contain some classified military documents that Ali Muhammad stole from Fort Bragg, as well as audio tapes of the Blind Sheikh calling for terrorist attacks in America.
There was a treasure trove of connections to terrorist groups. Unfortunately, most of it was not exploited or even looked at the time of Nosair being arrested.
The Manhattan DA's office prosecutes Nosair as a lone gunman, not as part of a conspiracy.
In that environment, when there wasn't the perception of a larger terrorist Islamic threat to the United States, we didn't conceive of them being capable of carrying out a conspiracy to ultimately harm the American public.
Near San Francisco, California, 1990. Ali Muhammad meets with an FBI agent here. It's the next step in his mission, now directed by the evolving al-Qaeda leadership in Afghanistan. Muhammad offers his services as a translator. During the interview, he tosses out some raw intelligence to prove his worth. As a result, the FBI ends up using him not as a translator, but as an informant. One of Muhammad's assignments will be to infiltrate this mosque in Santa Clara, run by a group of radical Palestinians. Just as he did with the CIA in Germany, Muhammad exposes the operation, revealing himself as an FBI plant. But the FBI does not discover the betrayal at the time. Brooklyn, New York, February 1991. The Blind Sheikh gives speeches denouncing his fellow Egyptian, Mustafa Shalaby, who runs the recruitment center at the Brooklyn Mosque. Both men are allies of bin Laden, but they disagree about how to use all the money that Shalaby raised for the Afghan jihad. Shalaby wants to use it for charity, but the Blind Sheikh wants to use the money for terrorism. His ally, bin Laden, is agitating to strike back at the U.S. in the wake of the Gulf War. Bin Laden is incensed that the U.S. has established bases in his native Saudi Arabia, the Holy Land of Mecca and Medina. The Blind Sheikh's attacks continue. Shalaby has decided that he and his wife should travel home to Egypt. On the day that Shalaby's wife is heading to the airport, Ali Muhammad happens to be in New York and gives her a ride. March 1st, 1991. A neighbor in Shalaby's Coney Island apartment building notices his door open. Inside, Shalaby lies in a pool of blood. He's been stabbed, shot, and strangled. The apartment has been ransacked. Police suspect the Blind Sheikh is behind the murder, but they find no physical evidence that connects anyone to the crime, and there are no arrests. According to terrorism expert Steve Emerson, Ali Muhammad may be the reason why. He allegedly receives an assignment from the Blind Sheikh's terror cell.
After the killing, he was brought in to clean up the apartment and to make sure that nobody who was involved in the killing could ever be found. That murder was never solved to this day.
With Shalaby out of the way, the Blind Sheikh takes over the Al-Khifa Center. He allows this al-Qaeda associate from Texas, a 30-year-old Lebanese-American named Wadi El-Hajj, to manage it briefly. Osama bin Laden now has a loyal outpost in New York City. And though the FBI does not realize it yet, there is a terror cell operating here, with links to bin Laden, the Blind Sheikh, and Ali Muhammad. Muhammad is now ready to take on more ambitious assignments for al-Qaeda around the world, as the terror organization grows into a global threat. Peshawar, Pakistan, late 1991. Here, at this city near the Afghan border, Ali Muhammad is carrying out a major assignment for Al-Qaeda to help Osama bin Laden move to a new base of operations. Bin Laden has enemies everywhere and needs a personal security force. Muhammad's wife back in California believes he's just away on another business trip. Bin Laden has enough faith in Muhammad that he entrusts him to coordinate the dangerous move and protect him from attack. They cross 1,000 miles by car, sometimes putting bin Laden in disguise. They deliver him to Karachi, Pakistan, where his private jet is waiting. From Karachi, bin Laden travels here to Khartoum, Sudan, where the radical Islamic government has agreed to protect him and about 500 of his followers. It becomes bin Laden's new headquarters. New York City, December 1991. Bin Laden helps achieve a victory in an American courtroom. The Al-Qaeda leader contributes $20,000 to a defense fund for Egyptian El Sayed Nosser, charged with the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane. Renowned defense attorney William Kunstler represents Nosser and convinces the jury to only find him guilty on gun and assault charges. Attending a celebration party the following night in this Brooklyn mosque is this ex-Egyptian military officer, Imad Salem. But unlike Ali Muhammad, he despises the blind sheikh for his role in the Sadat murder. Salem has made a deal with the FBI and agreed to go undercover as a mole to try and expose the blind sheikh's terror cell for $500 a week.
He had posed himself as a bomb maker. In fact, he really had no bomb making knowledge at all. But again, he played the role well. He made himself invaluable to the sheikh.
Within weeks, as seen in this news footage, Salem is serving occasionally as the blind sheikh's bodyguard and also accompanying him on fundraising trips. Host Afghanistan, September 1992. Ali Muhammad is at an outpost in the mountains near the Pakistani border. It is home to an international university of terrorists, sponsored by bin Laden. Hundreds of applicants from more than 50 countries worldwide converge here to attend a boot camp. Muhammad is one of the instructors. He's known as an especially demanding teacher. He drills his students in hand-to-hand combat and explosives. They rehearse for kidnappings and assassinations. They practice surveillance of bombing targets. They learn to organize a terror cell. He spends months at a time training Al-Qaeda foot soldiers, both in Afghanistan and in Sudan.
The success of any terrorist attack depends on two things. One is surveillance and reconnaissance of the future intended target. Second is rehearsal. Ali Muhammad introduced these two concepts to Al-Qaeda.
Muhammad draws on his experience as a security consultant for Egypt Air to teach his students how to hijack a plane. He explains where the hijackers should position themselves in the cabin and how to smuggle utility knives on board.
Did they have the FAA manual as to what would allow them to put on the airplane, what you could bring on the airplane in terms of knives and other stuff? The answer is yes.
Ali Muhammad is so confident in his ability to operate under the radar that he pulls off yet another audacious infiltration, this time to help raise money to pay for terrorist operations. Dr. Ayman al-Zawahri is now one of bin Laden's closest advisors. With Ali Muhammad's help, Zawahri enters the U.S. under an alias, using a fake passport provided by Muhammad. Muhammad accompanies him on a fundraising tour of mosques on the West Coast. They claim to be raising money for Red Crescent, the Islamic relief organization. New York City, fall 1992. FBI mole Imad Salem uncovers valuable intelligence about the blind sheikh and his connections to terrorism. The FBI decides that Salem now has to wear a wire, or hidden bugging device, to record his conversations with the terrorists who are linked to the blind sheikh. Salem refuses.
He didn't want to wear a wire because Sheikh Rockman was an important jihad figure in the world. If he turned against any one of that groups, would have to worry about his family at home.
Salem's refusal to wear a wire makes some FBI officials begin to question his credibility.
There was a discussion in the office because he wasn't wearing the wire, maybe he wasn't telling the truth. So he was dismissed.
The FBI has now lost its eyes and ears inside the blind sheikh's Brooklyn cell, and the blind sheikh has lost the man he thinks is a bomb maker. Soon, another bomb maker, a real one, will be on his way to New York. Ramzi Youssef will team up with members of the blind sheikh's terror cell, men trained by Ali Mohammed, and pull off the first major act of Islamic terrorism on U.S. soil. By 1992, former U.S. Army Sergeant Ali Mohammed is playing a critical part in the growth of Al-Qaeda. One long-term project has widespread impact. Mohammed creates a training manual that bin Laden distributes to his troops worldwide. In writing it, the former U.S. Army Sergeant makes ample use of the documents that he stole from Fort Bragg.
Ali Mohammed created a body of knowledge that would help Al-Qaeda's transformation from guerrilla force into a urban terrorist organization.
Using this curriculum, Mohammed conducts seminars at Al-Qaeda training camps on everything from assassinations to surveillance. Bin Laden himself takes one of his classes. Mohammed is confident enough in his relationship with bin Laden that when the time comes to give out grades, he gives the Al-Qaeda leader a C. September 1st, 1992. A flight arrives here at New York's Kennedy Airport from Pakistan, carrying Ramzi Youssef, a bomb-building genius with a dozen aliases. Using a fake Iraqi passport, he tries to convince U.S. immigration officials that he is a refugee. The INS detains Youssef, and then, due to a lack of beds at this INS holding facility, releases him. The INS does find a bed, however, for Youssef's traveling companion. In his suitcase, officials discover terrorist manuals, as well as U.S. military training manuals from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Both Youssef and his companion received training in terror camps at around the same time that Ali Mohammed was teaching in Afghanistan. Youssef heads immediately for the Al-Qifa Center in Brooklyn. It's home to the terror cell now led by the blind sheikh and trained by Ali Mohammed. Youssef soon begins working out of this storage facility in Jersey City, New Jersey. He buys fertilizer and fuel oil to build a 1,500-pound bomb that he hopes will destroy the World Trade Center. 3 of his co-conspirators have been trained by Ali Mohammed and photographed by the FBI 3 years earlier at a firing range on Long Island. February 26, 1993. Ramzi Youssef and 3 other cell members load their 1,500-pound bomb into a yellow Ryder van. They park it on the B2 level beneath the Twin Towers. 12:17 p.m. Youssef's bomb detonates. It creates a 7-story crater. Kills 6 people and injures 1,000 more. But Youssef has failed. The bomb was not powerful enough. The towers stand. Ramzi Youssef flees the country, frustrated, but still determined to bring down this symbol of America's global might. Vancouver, British Columbia. June 1993. 4 months after the World Trade Center bombing, Ali Mohammed waits at the airport here to pick up an old colleague. The colleague is a 24-year-old fellow Egyptian named Issam Marzouk, one of the men who helped Mohammed move Osama bin Laden out of Afghanistan 2 years earlier. But Marzouk runs afoul of the Canadian customs officials. When he tries to slip through using a fake Saudi passport, they arrest him. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police take Marzouk into custody. They quickly detain Ali Mohammed as well and question him for hours. Finally, Mohammed gives the Mounties a phone number and asks them to call it. On the other end of the phone, the person who answers vouches for Mohammed. It is his FBI control agent in San Francisco.
Ali Mohammed calls the FBI, and the FBI intervenes to some extent. I don't think you have to be an agent who has worked, terrorism all their life to realize something is terribly amiss here.
And yet, with the FBI agent's blessing, the Mounties release Ali Mohammed. When he returns to the U.S., the FBI takes no action against him. Mohammed's FBI handler does, however, follow up by conducting an interview with him in San Francisco. Mohammed explains that a man named Osama bin Laden runs an organization called Al-Qaeda. He says bin Laden wants to overthrow the Saudi government. He admits to the agent that he has been to Afghanistan and taught at bin Laden's training camps there. He says the subjects included intelligence and hijacking. The FBI agent notifies his superiors in Washington.
To his credit, says, this is a little bit out of my league, so I think I ought to get somebody out here who is a specialist on this. So he contacts the FBI headquarters.
The FBI puts in a request for someone with the right kind of expertise in the U.S. military to come interview Mohammed. The Pentagon decides to send officers from Fort Meade, Maryland, headquarters of the National Security Agency.
Out from Fort Meade comes military officers who are traveling in the black. In other words, they've got false IDs and everything, covering up who they are.
The intelligence officers debrief Mohammed. An FBI agent will later try to find out what Mohammed was telling these top-secret officials about bin Laden and his training camps. The Pentagon tells him the reports were probably destroyed.
Ali Mohammed knew how to exploit the system perfectly and to play off one branch of an agency, such as the FBI, against another. He had provided just enough details of Al-Qaeda to be considered an asset, but not enough that would result in him being suspected as a key player in the organization itself.
Within the FBI, officials later acknowledge there is not enough communication between agents in different cities. As a result, counterterrorism officials in New York do not learn about Ali Mohammed's admission that he visited bin Laden's training camps.
Back during that time period, there didn't seem a coordinated group, let me put it this way. You had pockets of people in different places. We didn't have the opportunity to say that, things that were going on in New York had a relationship to California.
In the months after the World Trade Center bombing, the FBI and Justice Department are playing catch-up. The investigation shows links to the blind sheikh. The pressure is on to do something about him.
I think the American people are absolutely outraged that the 55-year-old so-called cleric is going around saying to people, hit hard and kill the enemies of God in every spot.
FBI officials decide the best way to gather evidence on the blind sheikh is to bring back their Egyptian informant, Imad Salem. He's the man they dismissed 6 months earlier because he wouldn't wear a wire. This time, instead of $500 a week, they agree to pay him $1 million. At the time, Mary Jo White is the new U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
You've got to think, who is going to be able to infiltrate a group of terrorists like these? It's not going to be your, FBI agent with the short haircut and the button-down collar. It ain't going to work.
Salem goes back undercover as a supposed bomb maker for the Blind Sheikh's terror cell. In this surveillance video, Salem and members of the cell are mixing materials for bombs. The men are planning to use bombs to blow up New York City bridges and tunnels, as well as the headquarters of the United Nations.
It permitted, uniquely and rarely, for the FBI to get inside one of these plots. A group of extremist Islamists wanted us destroyed, basically. Declared war on us. America's the great Satan.
The FBI and New York police do not yet have enough evidence to arrest the Blind Sheikh in connection with the bomb plot. At the same time, INS officials try to arrest him as an illegal immigrant. He takes refuge inside this mosque, one of 3 he controls in the New York area. It's a place of worship, where he believes authorities will be unwilling to arrest him. July 2nd, 1993. Authorities finally work out a deal to take the Blind Sheikh into custody, not for the bombing plot, but on immigration charges. He's later indicted in the bridge and tunnel scheme, what becomes known as the Day of Terror plot. Law enforcement is starting to connect at least some of the dots.
I can't emphasize enough how excruciatingly difficult and novel a lot of these issues were. You always look back and think, what could I have done differently? I mean, you'll never know the answer to that, but you certainly second-guess yourself constantly.
By now, the FBI's San Francisco office has established that Ali Mohammed is somehow connected to bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. But the Bureau lets him remain free. Free to pursue his next and most violent mission for Al-Qaeda. Khartoum, Sudan, 1993. Ali Mohammed carries out an unprecedented assignment for Osama bin Laden. He makes arrangements for a summit between bin Laden, a Sunni Muslim, and this man, Imad Mughniya, a top leader of Hezbollah, a Shiite Muslim terrorist group funded by Iran. Sunni and Shiite extremists are bitter rivals. Bin Laden puts that aside to unite with Hezbollah against their common enemy, the United States. Mohammed met with Hezbollah operatives a decade earlier when the CIA sent him on a mission to Germany. He now uses his contacts to bring Mughniya to bin Laden's headquarters here in Sudan.
Imad Mughniya told bin Laden the importance of conducting coordinated, simultaneous suicide attacks. So in many ways, the transfer of that critical knowledge from Lebanese Hezbollah into Al-Qaeda was accomplished as a result of a meeting that was arranged by Ali Mohammed.
Following the summit, Al-Qaeda fighters traveled to Lebanon for advanced explosives training with Hezbollah. They will use what they learn here on their next battlefield, in East Africa. Mogadishu, Somalia. October 1993. U.S. Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, and Delta Force Commandos are working to keep the population from starving in Operation Restore Hope. But a local warlord is stealing food that is supplied by the UN. Osama bin Laden, enraged at the presence of U.S. troops in Africa, dispatches a group of Al-Qaeda operatives to assist the local warlords. The man who had trained some of the Al-Qaeda fighters is none other than Ali Mohammed, the 41-year-old U.S. Army veteran who has served at Fort Bragg alongside Delta Force troops. On the afternoon of October 3rd, Black Hawk helicopters like these go on a mission to snatch two of the local warlords' top aides. Suddenly, rocket-propelled grenades roar up. They take down one Black Hawk and then a second. Rescue efforts lead to a 14-hour street battle. 18 U.S. soldiers are killed and more than 70 wounded. Within days, President Clinton announces that he is pulling U.S. troops out of Somalia. Bin Laden claims a victory, believing the Americans have no stomach for war. Nairobi, Kenya, December 1993. Ali Muhammad arrives here to work with a terror cell that bin Laden had established. As a cover, he works in diamonds and leather. One of his associates is this man, Lebanese-American Wadi El-Haj. He's the same man who briefly managed the Al-Khifa Center in Brooklyn. An Al-Qaeda operative, El-Haj serves as bin Laden's personal secretary. Now in Nairobi, he's created a charity organization called Help Africa People. He uses it to obtain identity papers for the other cell members. The men address each other by code names. Ali Muhammad uses the name Jeff. Wadi El-Haj goes by Norman. Their code for the FBI is the food and beverage industry. One of Muhammad's assignments is to surveil a series of American and Western bomb targets in Kenya. He takes photos of buildings, including the French and U.S. embassies. He also photographs British and Israeli targets. Khartoum, Sudan. Sometime between 1993 and 1994. The mastermind of the World Trade Center truck bombing, Ramzi Youssef, is hiding out here. Ali Muhammad trained some of the men who worked with Youssef to execute that bombing. Youssef is now plotting more terror attacks. He sets up a terror cell with this man, Abdul Hakim Murad, an old friend and pilot trained in 4 U.S. flight schools. Another member of the cell is Youssef's uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They are working on a plot to blow up jumbo jets headed for the U.S. from Asia. The men also begin work on an ambitious suicide plot. The idea is to use airplanes as missiles and fly them into landmark American buildings like CIA headquarters and the Pentagon. San Jose, California, December 1994. In response to the FBI's request, Ali Muhammad returns to the U.S. from Kenya. He meets here with an FBI agent and an assistant U.S. attorney. They ask him to explain what he's been doing and his connections, if any, to the blind sheikh. Muhammad claims he is just working in the scuba diving business in Kenya. He admits he helped Osama bin Laden move out of Afghanistan back in 1991. He also admits he traveled to Pakistan during the Afghan war, but only, he says, as an observer. As prosecutors and defense attorneys haggle over evidence and witnesses for the Day of Terror trial, Ali Muhammad becomes a highly sensitive subject. In the end, the government makes a concession to the defense. It will acknowledge in open court the role of the U.S. in aiding the rebels in Afghanistan. But it seems prosecutors do not want Ali Muhammad to testify. The defense has a theory as to why.
It was my view that the government did not want Ali Muhammad to testify and that they would do anything in order to prevent that from happening. The reason why the government didn't want Ali Muhammad to come to trial, which became clear with the benefit of hindsight, was that he was an operative and he was working through various intelligence agencies.
Muhammad phones his fellow terrorists in Nairobi. They instruct him to stay in the U.S. The Al-Qaeda operatives want Muhammad to find out what, if anything, U.S. authorities know about them. The Day of Terror trial gets underway in New York. Muhammad obtains a copy of this list of 172 unindicted co-conspirators. Osama bin Laden's name is on it, and so is his own. He sends the list off to Nairobi with instructions to forward it to bin Laden, so the Al-Qaeda leader will know he is now on the radar of U.S. law enforcement. Islamabad, Pakistan, February 1995. At this Al-Qaeda safe house, U.S. and Pakistani authorities seized the mastermind of the World Trade Center truck bombing, Ramzi Youssef. Youssef's uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or as investigators call him, KSM, is also staying here. But authorities do not identify him as part of the terror cell. FBI agents take Youssef into custody. KSM, who will become known as the mastermind of 9/11, disappears. The FBI brings Youssef back to the U.S. They transport him by helicopter to a Manhattan jail. The pilot passes the World Trade Center. Youssef is forced to see the building he tried to destroy. As he heads to prison, Al-Qaeda will move forward with his plan to use planes as missiles. January 17, 1996. A federal judge in New York delivers long prison sentences to the blind sheikh, El Said Nosair, and 8 others found guilty in the Day of Terror plot to blow up bridges and tunnels. Surveillance video of the plot, made with the cooperation of the FBI's mole, Imad Salem, helped convince the jury.
This jury was paying attention, they listened to the tapes, they followed the key evidence, and the key evidence against the sheikh was on tape.
U.S. authorities are just beginning to establish ties between the blind sheikh and Osama bin Laden. And though they don't know it yet, their own source and former U.S. Army Sergeant Ali Mohammed is the living evidence of that connection. Langley, Virginia, January 1996. Osama bin Laden is now flashing on the radar screen of U.S. intelligence. CIA officers in Sudan have uncovered evidence that he is funding a wide array of terrorist plots. The agency establishes a special unit to investigate the Al-Qaeda leader. The FBI and the Justice Department team up with the CIA to build a criminal case against bin Laden. As part of the investigation, FBI Special Agent Jack Clunan takes on the case of Ali Mohammed. It's the first time the FBI has taken a long, hard look at the former U.S. Army Sergeant, who they now know has some kind of connection to bin Laden.
These people, particularly Ali, were within reach, so let's go out and try to gain their cooperation and see what we can find out.
Santa Clara, California. Mohammed receives a call from a fellow terrorist in Britain who needs some help. Mohammed flies over to London to conduct terror training. They do mock surveillance runs at a shopping mall, in the underground, and on bridges. Around this time, Mohammed also receives a phone call from his mentor and bin Laden's close advisor, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. Zawahiri asked Mohammed to conduct surveillance and gather information on U.S. Army troop movements in Saudi Arabia. This time, Mohammed declines.
I think he was beginning to think, enough is enough. I do believe that Ali was trying to build another life for himself. But somehow he's always being brought back into it. I mean, at his basic core, he believed in jihad.
Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. June 25th, 1996. A truck bomb loaded with 5,000 pounds of explosives detonates outside the Khobar Towers military complex. It kills 19 U.S. servicemen from a fighter wing responsible for enforcing the no-fly zone in southern Iraq. Hundreds more are wounded.
The cowards who committed this murderous act must not go unpunished.
The FBI will collect evidence showing that Hezbollah executed the attack. Al-Qaeda operatives may have helped Hezbollah carry it out. On the day of the attack, Al-Qaeda militants called bin Laden to congratulate him. If Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah have formed an alliance, then Ali Mohammed's key role in their summit helped forge the first critical link. Unaware of Mohammed's role within Al-Qaeda, the FBI and CIA are now trying to learn what they can about the organization. In Nairobi, they place a wiretap in the home of this man, Wadi El-Haj. He's the Lebanese American who has been building a terror cell with Ali Mohammed. Based in part on the wiretap, an FBI agent searches El-Haj's house in August 1997. He confiscates a laptop computer and address books. The files contain phone numbers for both Osama bin Laden and Ali Mohammed. El-Haj, a U.S. citizen, rushes home to Texas. During a flight change in New York, FBI agents grab him. Federal prosecutors bring the Al-Qaeda operative before a grand jury. He denies any terrorist involvement. They don't have enough evidence to charge him, so they release him. Sacramento, California. Fall 1997. FBI agents, along with Assistant U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, arrange a dinner date with Ali Mohammed at this hotel across from the state capitol. By now they've concluded that Mohammed is playing a role within Al-Qaeda. They try to convince him to cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. Mohammed expresses no interest in a deal or in dinner. The encounter makes him realize that his time is running out.
He's looked at us very brazenly and said, I can get out any time, you'll never find me. I got travel documents, I got false documents, I've got a whole network, you'll never find me.
Over the course of the meeting, Mohammed is bold enough to admit that he trained bin Laden's bodyguards and lived at his house in Sudan for a time. He says that bin Laden's people were responsible for killing American soldiers in Somalia. He tells his dinner companions that he loves bin Laden and that there's no need for a fatwa to attack the United States because the U.S. is the enemy. He makes a powerful impression on the law enforcement officials, including Patrick Fitzgerald, a prosecutor known for taking on violent drug traffickers and mobsters.
That night, Pat Fitzgerald looked at me and said, this is the most dangerous man I have ever met. When you started to look back historically at what the FBI had amassed on Ali Mohammed, you start hearing that old theory, you know, connect the dots. Something starts to add up and say, you know, why haven't we looked at this guy sooner?
After the dinner, the FBI agents allow Mohammed to remain free because they have nothing to charge him with. But they begin secretly recording their phone calls with him. They gain access to Mohammed's bank records, and they begin the time-consuming business of getting court approval for a wiretap on Mohammed's apartment in Sacramento. Mohammed is now aware that U.S. authorities view him with suspicion. But he continues to play the game and offer bits and pieces of intelligence. In fact, in one recorded phone call with an FBI agent, Mohammed refers to a possible bomb target in East Africa. Given that it's a vague reference, the FBI takes no action based on the comment. But the Al-Qaeda plot that Mohammed spearheaded in Africa 4 years earlier is about to come to fruition. Nairobi, Kenya, December 1997. Prudence Bushnell, U.S. Ambassador to Kenya, cables warnings to Washington. She conveys her fears, based on U.S. and Kenyan intelligence reports, that the embassy here has been targeted for a terrorist attack. Bushnell requests funding to build a more secure embassy. The State Department denies her request. On August 7, 1998, shortly before 10:30 a.m., two men drive a cargo truck packed with TNT. They pull up to the rear gate of the U.S. Embassy. It's the location that Ali Mohammed scouted and photographed for bin Laden 5 years earlier. The man in the passenger seat jumps out. He tosses a homemade grenade at the Kenyan guards to distract them and runs away. The grenade blast draws dozens of workers inside the embassy to their windows. Ambassador Bushnell is attending a meeting at a bank building just behind the embassy. She too hears the blast. Moments later, the truck driver detonates his cargo of dynamite. The explosion rips into the 5-story embassy. Glass shatters in every direction. The back of the building collapses. The blast also demolishes the bank building next door. Ambassador Bushnell narrowly escapes with her life. 213 people die, including 12 Americans.